September. So let's start with, let's go again together through the main features, and Constant and myself will alternate each other in this presentation. So first of all, this we refer to the flexible process as a process that is giving flexibility to the standards development. It's important that we all are very aware by the fact that this is the only process from the 1st April 2020 for the development of EN. So this is the process. So from now on, we can get rid of flexible process because we don't want to leave the idea that there are the two processes in parallel for the end. So this is the new process for the standards development. And of course, the main feature is that we want to make the technical committees fully responsible for the timely and effective delivery of standards. It means that they will have full autonomy in planning and organizing their work, of course, within a specified maximum time frame. And this planning will be done per work item.
Indeed, thank you, Alberto, and good morning, everybody. This is Constant speaking. I may continue this recap on the new process for the development of standard. And as you know, and something that is very important to keep in mind is that this process is applicable to any standard for which CEN and or CENELEC have the lead, which means any homegrown CEN and or CENELEC work item, which includes also those deliverables developed by joint technical committees. And of course, as a matter of fact, also the CEN work items under the Vienna Agreement with CEN lead. So all those work items for which CEN and CENELEC have the possibility to master the process, to define the timelines, the different steps. And of course, as you know, harmonized standard is the priority of CEN-CENELEC, is one of the prerogatives of the ISOs. Therefore, harmonized standards also fell within that process. And actually, we believe, and we will also count on your feedback on that, but we believe that the tools that are provided for the planning of the work item can be also very useful and meaningful for the planning in terms of, with respect to the deadline which are set in the standardization request. So that's the idea applicable to any homegrown CEN-CENELEC standard, including, of course, joint technical committees.
So, how and when did we apply the process? Work items for which the new work item proposal has been prepared and launched after 1st April 2020. You know very well that the new work item proposal is a TC delegated decision in CEN, while in CENELEC, the CENELEC BT has to approve the new work item. That's why for the CENELEC work item, it took some more time before start implementation, because we need to count the 4 weeks of consultation in BT after the new work item was approved by the CENELEC TC. And from that moment, of course, then we reach the stage 1099, and so this starts, the clock has started to tick.
Thank you, Alberto. And just in the meantime, I take this opportunity to tell us that apparently some people have difficulties to connect to the webinar. So this is something you may have a look at.
Yes, I will. I think it is related to the fact that we switched from meeting to webinar. So I had one colleague asking for the link. If people can send me a mail, I can do the necessary.
All right, thank you, Els. And let's continue with indeed with the presentation and with the overview of the process as you know. So basically, the idea with that overview is to tell you that we have two stages for which technical committees have the opportunity to decide on some specific dates for the delivery of the draft, the first working draft, the draft for inquiry, and the final draft for the formal votes. So actually on this timeline, you can see all the different steps that need to be passed, from the start of a project until the publication of a standard. So as you know, this timeline is made of steps for the technical committee to work on the draft. And the timeline is also made of steps for CCMC or for the CENELEC members to edit, to translate, to run the different formal steps in that timeline. So what is important to know at this stage, indeed, is that we are moving from rigidity to flexibility when it comes to stages A and E, in the sense that one technical committee can decide on the time that he will spend for those stages.
It is important to underline that the stage E, the one that you have here in dark blue on the screen, starts from the closure of inquiry from 4060 until 4599, the dispatch of the FPRN. It is important that you need to keep this into account when planning on the new work item form. We will come back on this later. In yellow, you will see what are the differences related to the previous document. We will come back in a specific session, but since we present again the main features, we want to also give you the updated figure. Okay, so basically, what is the main actions that have to be done when planning? This is about allocating a time, a duration, basically, work item per work item. So we don't have anymore a default standards time for all work items, but the C can customize. Indicating pre-target dates in both CENELEC new work item forms. So the target date for dispatch of the first draft, target date for dispatch of the inquiry draft, and the target date for dispatch of the formal vote draft. That basically are here in the figure: 2060 dispatch of first working draft, 3099 dispatch of FPRN, and dispatch of the FPRN for the formal vote. A novelty, it's in yellow, therefore we will come back. For CENELEC work items and CENELEC JTC, sorry, here it's missing a J, JTC's work items, you will also be required to add the duration of the single stages in weeks. We will come back later for the reason. You may remember that for the CENELEC work items, in the webinar in March, it was a recommendation. Now it's mandatory.
Indeed, and we will come back later on the details why it has become a requirement. But actually, at this stage, I also would like to highlight the how, the different requirement in terms of duration, actually, and in the context of the different stages. And something that is very important to know is that we have, those requirements for the duration and for the TA, which means the time that is spent between the approval of the new work item and the delivery of the draft for inquiry. The minimum is 1 week. Then for the stage E, which means between the closure of the public inquiry and the delivery of the final draft for the formal vote, the minimum duration shall be 6 weeks. And at the end, with a total of a maximum of 68 weeks, which means that if we take into account those 68 weeks for those two stages, minus the 6 weeks, which is the minimum duration for the stage E, it means that the maximum duration for the stage A, which means the stage between the approval of the work item until the delivery of the draft for public inquiry shall be of a maximum of 62 weeks. And also something that is important for you to know, because when we talk about the stage A, which means, again, the one between the approval of the new work item and the delivery of the draft for the public inquiry, in the middle of this stage, we also have the milestone which corresponds to the delivery of the first working draft. And actually, this is the period of the stage A divided by 2. So, of course, this is something that is strict, let's say, but of course, we remain within a flexible process. But what is important for you to know at this stage is that at a certain moment in time, CCMC as well as the TC shall be aware that first working draft is available.
Now we go in the second part of this webinar, but first I see that in question and answers, we had a question. I think we can take it now, this question. So from Bernard Schaffner, when the inquiry draft is ready, soon after work item adoption, for instance, after a premium work item, can the first working draft step skip? This is a question that has already been asked also under the previous webinar. Maybe we can come back here. Basically, the question is if during the premium work item the TC has worked on the document and is more or less ready, the TC can skip the dispatch of first working draft and go directly to inquiry. Well, the recommendation of the technical boards and the decision reflected in the flexible process is that the dispatch of the first working draft is a very important element in the process. It's the time where finally the TC and therefore the members can see what has been developed. And of course, they can issue comments. This can already give an indication to the technical committee of how good is this first working draft. And this would also let the technical committee to improve the working draft, of course, through the working groups. To have, what is the final aim, is to have a successful inquiry. Inquiry is always combined to a vote. Therefore, if you, as TBOs, always carries out always dispatch the first working draft, you increase the chances to have a successful inquiry. So the question is, so the reply is no. The dispatch of first working draft should always happen in the process of standards development. Is there, so the question from Dominique Rosani, is there a minimum time requested between step 2060 and 3099? So basically, if we go to the slide, so basically the question is if there is some minimum time between dispatch of first working draft and dispatch of FPRN. Look at this condition is that the duration of the first working draft should be half time of the total duration for inquiry. It's not that difficult to, and since there is a very minimum time requested for 3099, you can fix a few weeks to work under stage A. I don't know, 2 weeks for dispatching the first working draft and other 2 weeks then to dispatch the inquiry draft. It is up to you. But anyway, this time, 2060 is always the half of the total time for inquiry. Another question, Jesse Matthew, I have a question about the time period available to convert the premium work item to a new work item. Is it within 2 years, within the new flexible process? Matthew, this has not been changed from the current rules. If I'm not mistaken, I think you have 3 years time to convert the premium work item into a new work item. This is not any way under the new process. This has not been changed.
Yes, and it's an opportunity to mention that this process really starts from the activation of the new work item until the publication. So the preliminary work item are not considered as such, and the same rules still apply.
Okay, we have received, I want to share with you an email that we have received. And actually, we received many emails. Well, many. We received around 6-7 emails with this similar problem. So this is a copy and paste of an email from a TC secretary. I was looking up the project planning for development of PRN, blah, blah, TC 189 recently approved a 9-month tolerance request. So I wanted to know what the adjusted timings for different stages would be. When I looked up that in projects, I was a bit puzzled why the dates provided under initial plan rather seem to reflect the adjusted timings, while the dates under adjusted plan would rather match the original planning. And then, of course, there was the screenshot. I will show you in the next. Slide. Could you please let me know? Blah blah. And similar question here. In the adjusted timeline, there I can see no change, but in the initial plan, the new target is at 21,820. This is a bit confusing. Why the adjusted plan is not the new one, but the initial plan? I kindly ask if the new tolerance is currently adjusted to projects. And actually, well, first of all, I would like to thank you because you have pointed a problem that is a real problem. And I want to show you exactly from a graphical point of view what is the problem and what is the solution that we have identified. Okay, Constant.
Yes, thank you, Alberto. And about the review of the planning, indeed, that's something important in that respect for you to know, because you may remember that in the previous webinars we mentioned that the technical bodies had to wait 4 weeks after the first working draft to be able to introduce any change to the planning, to the initial planning actually. And this is something that has been changed now and that has been decided by the BTs, in the sense that now at any time before the inquiry, the TC leadership, of course in cooperation with the relevant convener and expert, have the possibility to introduce changes to the planning, which means through 2 options, the one change option, which requires a TC decision, or also through a tolerance request, which requires a TC decision in CEN, and for which request requires a specific request from the CENELEC secretary for CENELEC. So this is the change, that the fact that technical bodies can introduce this kind of request at any time in the process before the start of the public inquiry. And this is what Alberto was mentioning. So Alberto, maybe you can continue on that.
Yes, exactly. So under the flexible process, you Constant explain what are the 2 solutions that you have at your hand to review the process. Currently, these both options, possibilities, trigger a change in the column initial plan. So you see the example here, for instance, dispatch inquiry draft to CCMC. So the 3099, we have a date, 31st December 2021, while in the adjusted plan, there is a previous date, because the change that has been requested, that could be a tolerance or the one change option, actually only impact the column initial plan. And this is the problem. This is exactly why some DC secretaries got lost, because they see adjusted plan. Also, the name adjusted plan should think that it reflects the later adjustment, and actually this is not the case. There is a technological reason for this. Of course, we will solve hopefully this problem. Is that the alerts are currently linked to the initial plan. Therefore, if the tolerance was only reflected in the adjusted plan, the alerts that were linked to the initial plan would have started ringing. So this is where we are working with our IT department to solve this problem. The adjusted plan at the moment only adjusts when there is a realized date. So let's imagine that when we will have the dispatch of the inquiry draft, so 3099, when we will have a date under the column realized, so the central column, then the adjusted plan will be adjusted. Of course, if there is an early dispatch, this will show this early date. If there is a late dispatch, this will be also displayed under adjusted plan. But remember that under the new process, the delay could be up to 4 weeks. If the delay is more than 4 weeks, then the work item is deleted. Of course, the 9 months tolerance and the one change option have been designed to give you the chance to review the process, the planning, in case you are late.
So yeah, indeed, in that context, it's the opportunity to share with you the solution we are working on to avoid this kind of misleading information in projects. Also taking into account that now projects is not only open to secretary, but to also to more public actually. So this is something crucial we are working on, and so the solution for increasing the clarity will be the following: the fact that the initial plan will never change anymore through the process once it has been agreed at the start. So the initial plan will always reflect what was decided at the very beginning, and the adjusted plan, the column on the very right, will be the one that will be basically adjusted depending on the realized date, which means the dates when the TC delivers the draft. And this column will also reflect the change triggered by the one change option and the tolerance request. So we will be able to increase the clarity and hence increase the project management approach as it is the responsibility of the technical committee. Thank you.
A second set of problems was highlighted for those projects that do not fall under the new flexible process, but were following the old project. For instance, if we think of TS or projects that are under Vienna agreement with the ISO lead, all what does not fall in the new process. Anyway, there were problems in the display. Why? Because basically, Projex-Online has only one way to present these dates. You see in the part, in the upper part of this table, how it was presented before April 2020. So you had the 3-year time frame that was basically the standard, the default time frame. And you had realized and you had confirmed. Now, after 1st of April 2020, for all work items, we have initial plan realized adjusted plan. We understand that this has caused some problems in understanding, try to interpret which date should be seen, and also that a similar problem as the one explained for the work items under the new process have been encountered when, for instance, including a tolerance. Of course, for the old projects, the 9-month tolerance was already there. The one change option is not applicable because it's a special feature of the flexible process. And as you can see here, the tolerance again was, so you see this is a project started on 10 February 2020, therefore it's not flex because it's before 1st of April 2020, and the tolerance is reflected only in the initial plan and not in the adjusted plan. So we have exactly the same problem as before.
Exactly the same problem, and for the non-flex. And what are the non-flex, as we call them, projects? Those are indeed those which started before April 2020, but also technical specification and technical report, which are not in the scope of this new process. But still, the solution shall be the same. It's very important that the adjusted plan reflects the latest status of the projects, and that the initial plan remains the same. Because even if we talk about TS and TR, for instance, it will always be possible to log a tolerance request for those projects. So once again, it's about the adjusted plan to reflect those changes. As Alberto mentioned, this is something we are working on, and of course, you will be notified as soon as it will be implemented. And in the meantime, of course, as it was mentioned, is the initial plan column which changes, and of course, your CCMC program manager, project manager is at your disposal in case of any doubt.
Okay, question time. Else?
Yes, we have a question for the audience, so please, we hope you are still awake. I'm going to launch the first question in a poll, so you have the possibility to lively click your reply. So here we go. You should be able to see the question on the screen now. So the question is, how will projects planning be visible on the Projex-Online applications once the modifications will be completed? What do you think?
So you should be able to reply on a real time on this.
Yes, I see people are doing so. So we have 15, 16, 17 replies already.
Let's give more time, maybe.
Yeah, a bit more time, and then we can end the poll, and normally should be able to share it with the audience as well. So thank you very much for your participation. You seem to be very awake this morning. Very good. Okay, I suggest to close it now and share it right away. Here we go.
So the question was, how will project planning be visible on Projex-Online once modifications will be complete? So once we will have done, let's say, implement the solutions that we have presented. So 14% replied that the column initial plan will always present the final deadlines to be eventually met. 73% replied correctly. The column adjusted plan will be the column that will reflect always the latest status of the project. And 14% unfortunately replied that information will have to be retrieved both in columns initial plan and adjusted plan. So well, thanks for your replies. And the idea is exactly to avoid that you get crazy and lost between the column initial plan and adjusted plan. Initial plan will reflect what was the planning at the beginning, while we will work on the adjusted plan to be always the final up-to-date plan for you. So you know where to look at. And this for projects under flexible process, and also all the projects. All projects. I saw there were some questions. Now I open question and answer, but I cannot see.
Alberto, I'm sorry, I took the opportunity to respond in writing, but maybe it's interesting to briefly address them live, because I had a question about the first working draft step. What is it about actually? And for those coming, for instance, from the CENELEC IEC community, this is something that will be similar to a CD1, CD2, for instance, which means the period when the draft of the standard comes from the working group to the attention of the technical committee for possible comment. So this is the stage for that. And then we had another question about the possibility to use the one change option. Can we use it once or can we use it several times? And actually the response is one time only. You will be able to enjoy the one change option only once, but of course keeping in mind that once you have used this option, you will still be able to introduce tolerance request if you are still late in the development process. And that's it for the time being.
Okay, now, well, we have another question from Bernard. What is the process to benefit from a COVID timing tolerance? So basically, in CEN, the decision was taken to let a 6 months period, a 6 months, let's say, maximum delay for the delivery of inquiry draft and formal votes, for which CCMC will not cancel the work item. In CENELEC, it's 3 months, and this also applies to the flexible process. So these will be applied also for the new projects. And of course, at the end of the 6 months, the technical committees are re-invited to deliver the draft. Of course, still the one change option apply. Again, the 9-month tolerance applies. So the advice would be, if you realize that you are late, you have a delay in meeting the planned dates, please use the one change option, please use the tolerance, and of course, as a last resource, let's say, benefit from the fact that CCMC will not cancel projects that are delayed, that are late. But use, please, first the elements that you have. Anemic venoments, how are work items under specific agreements affected by the flexible process? Well, in the PT decision, we acknowledge the fact that we would have brought to the European Commission the fact that some projects would have been late, and this has been done. We have implemented the decisions, and we are confident, we hope and we are confident that the European Commission will understand that we find ourselves in a very delicate situation for Europe and for the world because of COVID. So anyway, this has been transmitted. It has been reflected in the BT decision. It is already been transmitted. Constant, you want to say something more?
It's all right on my side. We can move on, and you can, of course, continue to ask questions through the presentation. All right, so we are moving to another item, to another aspect, which is also very important. It's actually directly concerning the definition of the target date. And here we would like to provide indeed some clarification, and starting with CEN actually. So you can already move to the next slide, Alberto, when it comes to the preparation of a new work item in CEN only. So as you know, the approval of a work item in CEN is a delegated decision granted by the CEN Technical Board, which means that the CEN Technical Committee then can take such a decision for the activation of a new work item. And of course, when the TC decides about the activation of a new work item, it agrees on the scope, on the project, but also on the different timelines, on the different duration, on the different milestones and targets. So this is why here, as a clarification or as a reminder, we would like to very much insist on the need to use the Projex-Online working area to first help the technical body officers to log some dates, some target dates, in order to have the complete planning of a dedicated project. And so this is a form that you can use within the Projex-Online area for defining the different milestone, and eventually that you can share within the technical committee for the approval process. And this is what you will be able to see on the next slide. This is a dedicated section within the Projex-Online working area. So actually this is the feature where you can start providing all relevant information for a new work item, but actually you don't have to validate everything and to proceed with the launch of the decision by correspondence, but you can stop before just after this step in saving all the different information in PDF, preferably, or in Word, so that at this stage you can have a complete package which you can submit to the technical committee for approval. So this is something that can be very useful for the CEN technical body officers in order to plan the work for a specific project.
I just want to make one comment here.
Yeah.
I am looking at the statistics on the work items, on how the dates have been planned under the flexible process. We still see that the old time frames for working under stage A, so the delivery of inquiry draft, and for the stage E, for dispatch formal vote, you still keep 34 weeks. You see, this is it's on the screen. You see that the first stage is a 17 plus 17 because it's the first the circulation first working draft is half time of the total time for the inquiry, so it's 34 in total. And then if you see below, between the closure of inquiry 46 and 45.99, it's 34 weeks. I just want to be sure that you understand that for CEN work items, when you go in the working area and you add the date, the start date of the project, you see it's in the superior part of this slide on the right, and then you calculate exactly the generation of these dates, then the main feature there is that you can edit 30.99 and 45.99. And the system will help you, because if you, by changing the date, automatically the duration in weeks change, so you don't have to do anything. The customization, this is just to say that the customization is very easy. So don't be afraid of moving far from the 34 weeks for the two stages, but customize the stage according to your needs. Okay, I see there are two questions. Anemic Venemans, not only for COVID, more general. So I guess that anemic refers to a previous question for standards under specific agreement. So basically, possibly candidate harmonized standards How do we manage delays with the European Commission? Well, actually, it's only for COVID because in theory, when we receive a standardization request and we have accepted as a CEN or CENELEC that standardization request, and in addition, we have even signed a specific agreement, because I think you make reference to a specific agreement in your question. There we have some deadlines with the European Commission that we need to respect. So it's only for COVID an exception that we can ask, because if there is a delay from our side on the deadlines, this should be well justified. I guess that the case could be that funding has not arrived, but be careful, because once we committed to respect that standardization request, and in addition we haven't signed a contract, these are the deadlines that we have to respect. So if you can take the one change option, you can take the tolerance, but make well all the calculations to meet the deadlines in the standardization request. Annika Almquist, if I, for some unknown reasons, I'm not able to put the target dates in CEN Projex-Online, can someone at CCMC do it for me? Okay, please contact, I would suggest you to contact maybe your PM first, or data service. I hope that as a CENTC secretary, you can use the Projex-Online working area. In this case, we are talking of CEN Projex-Online working area. Anyway, of course, we will try to give you assistance. So PM or data service. Okay, Kostas, maybe you can present also, let's say, to clarify again for CENELEC.
Yes, thank you, Alberto. So this part concerns CENELEC. When it comes to CENELEC, actually, it's the same principle as for CEN, but with a different approach, I would say. So first of all, what is the scope for CENELEC? It only applies to homegrown European standards. So those standards which are developed in CENELEC only, because as you know, that's the main difference between the Frankfurt and the Vienna Agreement. In CENELEC, there is no parallel development of standard with CENELEC lead. When there is a parallel development, it's always with the IEC lead. So as a matter of fact, some functionality of working area are not open to the CENELEC secretaries. This is something that will be under investigation in the future. We will assess the need to do that, but for the time being, it's not the case. But those features are managed by CCMC and the data team of CCMC directly. So what is it about actually when it comes to the preparation of the new work item? Indeed. So basically, the first part is the same as for CEN. It's the same principle. It's up to the technical body officers with relevant conveners and experts to define the planning of the project, taking into account the needs and the resources. And there, it will be important for the secretary also to decide about those 3 delivery dates. And what is important to know is that in CENELEC, the activation of a new work item is not a delegated decision to the TC, because this is a step which requires the approval of the BT. So for the CENELEC secretaries, you know, when you have a new work item that was agreed, you have to send it over to your PM and or to data service, and then it's up to the CCMC PM to draft the BT document, to send it to BT for a decision by correspondence, which will take 4 weeks. And actually, the experience is that when a TC secretary submits the form to CCMC with the 3 target dates, and considering sometimes the delay between the reception of the form by the PM and the possibility to make the BT document, and also considering the duration of the decision by correspondence, very often the date for the delivery of the first working draft or the date for the delivery of the draft for public inquiry did not match the requirement anymore, because those dates would have happened before the BT decision. And of course, those are administrative steps which are outside the responsibility of the CENELEC Technical Committee. So here we are moving from a recommendation to a requirement, in the sense that we are inviting you to express the target dates with days, basically, but also to a duration. And this is something that we will be able to see with the next slide, because this is something that will be very much of help for CCMC in order to log the data properly, in the sense that, for instance, for the first working draft, the target should be BT decision plus a number of weeks. For the delivery of the inquiry draft is the same, is the first working draft with plus a number of weeks. And of course, for the formal vote, it will be the closure of the inquiry plus a number of weeks. So this is something that will be very useful for us, and which will also demonstrate that you are not responsible for those administrative steps which have to be undertaken in that respect. So of course, you can still express the duration with a specific dates, but what is mandatory, what is required now, is to express through a duration, as it is expressed here on the screen.
Yeah, and just to say that I think that these target dates for inquiry to express as the date of working draft plus n weeks could be maybe misleading. I would prefer to, sorry if I make a correction in real time. And let's fix the inquiry, the target for inquiry as BT decision plus n weeks. It would be much more simple, and the target dates for the first working draft you can indicate, or anyway it will be easily deduced by the inquiry target dates. Because of course, if here we have 30 weeks, here in the first working draft target, the data service know very well that they have to put the half, so 15. And in this case, of course, we need to know a number of weeks that, of course, are no more linked to the BT approval, because in the meantime, we have had the editing time from CCMC, we had the translation, we had the beginning of the inquiry, the end of the inquiry. So basically, this starts from the end of inquiry. And here we make some example of what are a good example, because you should try to be for CENELEC work items, but also we'll see for work items from CENELEC joint technical committees, you should be in the shoes of data service. You know that PC secretaries cannot encode this data, but this will be in the new work item form, and then data service will look at the form and will insert the data. Imagine that the form has been prepared by TC secretary maybe 2-3 months before the BT final approval. Therefore, these dates, target dates, could be correct or not. Imagine there is a problem in CCMC processing the document to BT, or if BT did not agree in the first instance. So what is very important is to have the duration. So you see target dates and duration. So this way to fill in the new work item for CENELEC is fine. And you see that for dispatch to formal vote, you can only put the number of weeks for stage E. If you use only the target dates, it's no more good. it is no more recommendation to add the duration, but it's compulsory. If you put only the durations, we have checked with our colleagues in data, it's still good. So actually, you can, for simplicity, you can even not include the target dates, but only identify the durations for these three milestones. I would take the questions, or see there are many questions. Okay, so Jesse Matthew, once a new work item has been approved, how long do we know get before the PR consultation draft has to be ready? Once a new work item has been approved, how long do we know? How long do we now get before the parent consultation draft has to be ready? Constantine, do you have an answer for this? I don't understand really the...
Yes, so if I understand well, it refers to the period between the activation of the new work item to the target date for the delivery of the draft for inquiry. And you may remember one of the previous slides which mentioned the requirement according to which there is a minimum of 1 week to deliver the draft for public inquiry. Yep. So maybe I can continue with the next question, Alberto, if you don't mind.
Yes.
Yeah, because I see another one about do we need a BT decision for the inquiry target? And actually here, when we are in the frame of CENELEC, which means that we need a BT decision for the activation of the new work item, you need to keep in mind that BT will give its approval not only on the scope and the relevance of the project, but also on the target date. So the BT will give a decision on the complete package, I would say. So the inquiry target will be one element that will be decided by the BT when making the decision. I see another question from Dominic. Is the tool that you showed previously for CEN to calculate target dates in CEN projects accessible to working group secretaries? And actually, it's not the case since this tool has been designed especially for TC secretaries in order to put forward new work item. Then another question from Stefan. In a TC I'm responsible for, the decisions for the new work items were taken in April this year, but since the TC still had to decide on some aspect regarding the organization of the work items have not been activated yet. Is it still possible to change to the new flexible process, and do I need a TC decision to do so? So indeed, you did those actions right in the middle of the transition phase. I understand that the TC agreed on the project, on its scope, on its relevance, on its objective, but not on the planning. So indeed, in that respect, as far as I can see, I would advise to consult the TC once again, and especially on those target dates, so that you can put forward a TC decision which will have the full package and which will be eligible for the flexible process, for the new process indeed.
But this constant is for CEN-TC or CENELEC TC, and I really invite you, when you ask questions, please to specify if you work in a CEN-TC or a CENELEC TC, or is a CENELEC joint TC, just to better.
I understand it was for CEN-TC, and yes, it was confirmed by Stefan.
Okay, so you mean that it's possible to switch to flexible process? I think that you need to try to go in working area.
Yes.
Deactivate through the working area. If you can make it, then should fall under flexible.
Okay, very good. And before we continue, I just see one comment from Javier, which is linked to his previous question. So the minimum time was 1 week, and indeed the maximum time is 62 weeks from the BT decision. So good. I think we can move on.
There is also a question: do we need a BT decision for the inquiry targets?
Yes, Alberto, this is what I was saying, that BT makes a decision on the complete package, the scope, the technical elements, and also on the target dates.
So of course, this is for CENELEC TC.
For CENELEC TC, so it's not a separate BT decision.
Yeah, or for joint CENELEC, or for CENELEC joint TC. Okay, now let's also see again, just to clarify all aspects, how to review the plan. I think that you, Constant, you already covered these before. Here, the novelty for the one change option, of course, the name one change option means it can be taken only once and should be before the end of inquiry. This is the novelty, because before we made a reference to 4 weeks after the first working draft, but then under COVID, we decided to propose more flexibility. And actually, it was not well understood that the timing. So now it's at any time before the end of inquiry. It requires a TC decision. As a result, in CEN, secretary to adjust the working area. In CENELEC, the secretary will contact the data team. And this is for CEN, TC secretary, the interface that is available there, the working area on how to change the plan. In CENELEC, this will be implemented by data team. So the CENELEC secretary will contact data team for this one change option, and this will be implemented by data team. Constant.
Yes, just the time to unmute. Thank you. Yeah, and we continue with the review of the planning, the tolerance request indeed. So the practice indeed, and it's about a tolerance of 39 weeks, which correspond to 9 months. And of course, the following has not changed in the sense that it requires a TC decision in CEN, so implemented directly by the TC secretary, and in CENELEC, it relates to a TC secretary request made to the data team.
Yeah, and here nothing has changed. Okay, before going to the last section of the presentation, we have 2 questions. So from Iltrud Schulken, I hope I pronounced correctly your name. Have I understood correctly that also existing CEN work item can be subject to flexible approach, which actually necessary to switch? Well, we had the example of some work items that were not activated. We saw from the previous message of, I remember, maybe it was Stefan. If they already activate, I am not sure that this can be switched. I would say no, this stays under the previous process. And do you want to intervene, Constance?
No, that's very true, Alberto. Just mentioning that despite the fact that it will still be under the frame of the whole process, you will still be enjoy the possibility to introduce a tolerance request if needed.
Yeah. So one change, so for anemic, CEN one change option before inquiry or before the end of inquiry. Sorry, it's of course it's the reference is a 3099, so it's before the end of stage A, so before dispatching the inquiry draft. Because of course, if the inquiry is already started, it means that you have already delivered a draft for inquiry. So in that case, the one change option may not really help us. So maybe we'll, if I take this question as a point of improvement in our presentation, we will better clarify in the text, because of course at the end of this webinar, the presentation will be made available. Okay, and now we see the change to the process. Some of them we have already tackled while going through the process again. We can tackle the easy ones first, and just to say that the reference documents for the flexible process that has been saved again on the CENELEC boss and was also attached to the invitation email. Of course, has to reflect, especially in the flow chart of the different stages in the process, those decisions that are not really related to the specific flexible features, but that have been taken by the technical boards for the standards process in general. This is the 5-week translation period prior to formal vote that is applicable for all draft submitted CMC. Before, you may remember that it was optional for, let's say, draft that were not candidate for citation, was already a practice in place for standards candidate for citation, because when launching the assessment at the same time, translation was launched. Now, for any standard, candidate or not candidate, the translation will take place before formal vote. And then very recent decisions, the editing time before formal vote went back from 2 to 5. This impacts the number of weeks for internal process, 51 weeks, and of course, for the total time of the development of an EN, you should include the periods that you decide under the flexible process plus 51 weeks. Just to make it very clear on the screen, you can see where there is the yellow highlight. So on the number 5, on the B means editing. So this is the editing time is 5 weeks now. So this is the novelty. That's why it's in yellow above 5. And then C is a translation before formal vote. In the previous drawing, this C was presented as optional. Now it is a final decision to have it, this period always, translation always before formal vote. And so these 5 weeks should be added to the total time. I hope it's clear. And now let's see one of the novelty for the Gen technical committees, constant.
Indeed, because now, as you will be able to see in the CEN boss and the CENELEC boss, we also address the dimensions, the dimension which relate to a joint technical committee. And this is something you may be aware of, in the sense that when it comes to the activation of a new work item for joint technical committee, it is not a delegated decision to the joint technical committee, which means that we need to go through the BT decision making. Hence, the practice is very similar that for a CENELEC technical committee. So actually, it's the same principle and the same approach as for CENELEC, in the sense that the TC leadership has to decide on the date with the relevant expertise, etc. That the secretariat can run a CIV or a CIB, depending on the fact that the secretary is a NSB or a national committee. And as for CENELEC, actually, the following is very important, since we require that the target dates are expressed also through a dedicated duration, because we have this BT step before the activation of the new work item. So the practice is very similar to a CENELEC technical committee. And that's it, basically.
Okay. Else?
Yes, here we go again. Next question. Is everybody still awake? So we want to know from you if you know if the TCs always have to indicate the duration in weeks in the new work item form for CENELEC work items and for the CENELEC joint TC work items. So let me launch the poll. Here we go. And please submit your answers. I got, by the way, a comment related to the colors of the vote. So it is not true that the application will not highlight the right answer in the blue color and the incorrect answer in red. It's a bit inconvenient, let's say, that the answer given the most is highlighted by default in red, which is probably most of the times the correct answer.
Hopefully.
So So I see votes are still coming in. So please click now because we will soon close it. And then I'll publish it right away for everybody. Here we go.
Okay, so the first proposed reply was, so again, do TCs always have to indicate the duration in weeks in the new work item 4 for CENELEC work item and CENELEC JTCs work items? No, it is optional for CENELEC work items and JTC work items in addition to target dates, 17%. Yes, the duration in week is mandatory for CENELEC work items and JTC's work items, 83%. No, it is not relevant, 0%. So the right answer is now it's mandatory. So duration in week is mandatory for CENELEC work items and JTC's work item. Please remind this because if the duration in weeks is not included in the new work item 4 form is presented to the CENELEC BT and CENELEC BTs in case of JTCs, that that request will never be presented to BT. So we in CCMC we will bounce it back to the TC saying no, sorry, this new work item form is not good. All right, we can go ahead. And same example as for the CENELEC work items, what is acceptable as new work item form is acceptable target dates plus durations, of course. Only target dates are no more good, so the new work item form will be sent it back to the TC. Or again, we checked with our colleagues in data, only duration in weeks is good, so it's possible. So up to you. So it's 1 or 3. This,
Yes.
I think, Constant, we can maybe keep this slide because we presented in different aspects already throughout
Yes.
all the presentation. So
That's true, and maybe just maybe the opportunity to mention that it's true that such a change in the planning can be requested anytime before the inquiry, but of course the recommendation is to take such a decision a few weeks after the dispatch of the first working draft. But of course, this is really the prerogative of the TC and of the secretary. But we believe it's still an interesting recommendation because it's always useful to take stock of the different comments which may come in, because that can be very useful and meaningful to get an indication on the accessibility of the draft for the inquiry, because we always have to keep in mind in that process that the possibility to skip the formal vote based on the TC decision is always possible. So that is something very important indeed. And yes, Alberto, I think we can already move to the next slide.
Yeah. And this is basically to confirm what we already mentioned for Projex-Online. So we will improve Projex-Online so that the adjusted plan will always reflect the latest status of the project, including next stages. Also, alerts will be linked then to the adjusted plan, no more to the initial plan as it is today. And our IT colleagues will ensure that they will do the utmost to have this new feature in place as of 10 December 2020. So please, we ask you some more patience for the issues that you are currently experiencing on Projex-Online. Basically, when the problem comes when a tolerance is requested, but we'll try to solve this as from 10 December 2020.